Do you know that in Dallas, of course you do, if you're a Dallas sports fan, the Cowboys, kind of a big deal. They take up a lot of the air in the room for sports. Well, guess what? Today on Dlls, and don't call them that because it's kind of something they wouldn't like, we're going to do the Dallas Cowboys of the NHL, or what we might say is the Toronto Maple Leafs of the NFL. That's right. The other 31 Maple Leafs today, Luke Fox and Dave McCarthy are going to be on, along with Sean Ludz and myself. Better get it started. We got a lot to talk about right here on DLLS.
Get it ready, boys.
It is Thursday. It is August the 21st. This is the DLLS Stars podcast for the 4th of 5 days this week. And we are going to have a fun one today because we're talking about, it seems like there's always something with the Dallas Stars. There's always some drama. There's a story here. There's a president yelling at their players in the public, or a coach talking about mediocrity, or a coach calling out his goalie after a series loss in the conference finals, and then many other things. Well, guess what? If you thought Dallas was fun for sports drama, you haven't seen anything yet when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So today on the show, we will be talking about the Leafs. And before we bring on our guests, time to welcome in the other two members of today's show, Craig Ludwig and Sam Nestler. Fellas, when you hear, let's start with Luddy real quick before we bring on Luke.
Hey, Sam who?
Yeah, exactly. Sam won't be on the show today or tomorrow because we just don't have enough room. There's not enough air out here for all of this. Luds, when you think about the Leafs, there's always a story. There's always drama, right?
Yeah, if you want to call it drama. I think that you ask the reporters, as I'm sure you will in a couple minutes, there's never any shortage of something to write or talk about in that market.
And Sean, I think that makes it one of the toughest ones, right? When I think of really intense NHL media markets, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, New York, Boston are ones that come to mind very quickly.
I think from a media travel standpoint, I'll put it this way: it's the in a day and age where we don't have lots of media traveling around the world, there's not a lot of times when the circus comes to town in the NHL. And I would say Toronto and Montreal are the two where the circus still comes to town whenever a team comes, whenever based off the media contingency. And it's a great group. We're having two of them on. There's 15 to 16 of them that seems like they're on the road at all the times. And so it's a great group of guys, but it definitely is the traveling road show of the NHL.
Well, what a way to bring on our first guest, calling him one of the members of the Maple Leafs traveling circus from Sportsnet, their senior writer, Luke Fox, joining the show today. Hey, Luke, are you happy to be part of said circus?
I am part of the circus. It's a bit of a shrinking circus, though, unfortunately, because some of the papers are cutting down on travel budgets. So it seems to be a fewer reporters travel to all the games. But out of 41 road games, I'm at probably close to 35 of them, plus all the playoffs. So I'm around the team a lot. Definitely enjoy a bit of summer downtime, but training camp's just around the corner now, so we're starting to gear up.
All right, I want to start with something that's not very surprising. It's Mitch Marner. You wrote a piece at the beginning of July, so literally July 1st, as free agency began and the trade had just happened with Vegas. And it was a really well-written piece about Marner's departure and his tenure with Toronto. And it left me, believe it or not, feeling like I was reading an obituary, even though he's very much still alive. And I don't know if you're going for that tone, but that's sort of how it left as I went through that article.
Yeah, well, I think there's a sadness to it, right? Because on paper, this should have been the perfect marriage. Hometown kid, top five all time in a lot of Leafs scoring categories, fantastic defensively, number one on the PK unit, charismatic guy, plays a unique style, very creative. He's the kind of player that kids want to grow up dreaming to be. And he's playing for the team that he loved since he was a little kid, since he first laced up skates. So this should have been a storybook ending somehow between the repeated playoff failures of the team, the financial haggling over money and contracts. Things started getting a little bit bitter, whether it's between a segment of the fan base and Marner, between management and Marner. And it just felt like it was time for it to end. And I have no doubt that he's going to go on and make an impact with the Vegas Golden Knights. The Leafs should certainly still be a playoff team. It's hard to not imagine them taking a bit of a half step back without a 100-point guy, their leading scorer, suddenly not in the lineup. But there is a sadness to it because this should have worked out. He should have been a hometown hero. And instead, his final shift as a Leaf, I was in the building, there were jerseys getting tossed on the ice. There was beers getting tossed on the ice and at the bench. He yelled at his own teammates as things began to unravel in that Game 7 against Florida. And it feels like a bit of a tragic ending to what could have been something else if there had been more playoff success for the team.
Well, Luke, I look at a player like him, and there's 31 other teams, in my opinion, that would love to have him. And so who's going to miss him the most? I mean, I look at a guy like Austin Matthews. He's I'm not 100% on these numbers, but he's got like 410 goals.
Yeah.
I think Marner's assisted on 375 of them or so. So I mean, from Nylander to Matthews to Tavares, who's going to miss him the most? Does the team miss him as a whole, or do you think there's an individual player that is going to have to find a way to live without him?
Yeah, I think Craig Berube is probably going to miss him the most. Craig, just because he threw him over the boards. He was getting more ice time than some of the defensemen most nights. It was not uncommon for Marner to finish the night with the most ice time, and that's rare. Usually, it's one of your top two D-men, but the coaches, whether it was Berube this past season or Keefe before him, they just trusted him so much in all situations. Last minute of the game, you need a goal. You need a penalty killed. You need someone to suddenly run point on the power play or hold a lead. He was the guy just because his brain was so good. His stick was so good. He seldom made the wrong decision. And then he could also create out of nothing. So I think the coach is probably going to miss him the most, but I like your point about Austin. I was just having a conversation with my editor yesterday, actually, about, the moves, the additions the Leafs made, not the sexiest names, right? Matthias Michelli, Nick Waugh, Dakota Joshua. No one really pops. He's like, who's the guy? Who's the story at training camp? And for me, it's Austin. Can he hang without Mitch, and can he regain his form, coming off a season in which he was injured and he went from a 69 goal guy down to about 40. And it's like, okay, now you take away his number one playmaker, like you mentioned. Can he hang amongst we know he's a good player, but can he be a return to like top 5, top 8 forwards in the whole league? So I think Austin probably missed him the most.
With the whole team, Luke, and with Austin and that whole team, and obviously you mentioned that last shift is a 6-1 Game 7 loss to Florida. A lot of people, obviously I'm sure a lot of people in Toronto don't forget it, but they're an overtime away from being up 3-0 in that series, right? When you against the team that goes and wins the Stanley Cup. When you look at the final breakdown and reaction to that, how that season ended in the series loss to Florida, where are the proper reactions in your mind, and where are the overreactions? Because this is a team that for 9 periods looked like they were going to be up 3-0 in this series, and then ultimately did not get the job done.
Yeah, and some people say, like, to your point, they pushed the Panthers farther than any other team did. That they're the only team that pushed them to 7 games, and they did have what seemed at the time to be a dominant 2-0 lead in the series. And I think if it just happened in isolation, there'd be a little bit more tolerance for it, or a little more, hey, they were right there, they're really close. But I think it's unfortunately you can't separate 2025 from the rest of the history of this era of Maple Leafs, who have this tendency to not win the big game, not win Game 5 at home when they had a chance to really put the boots to Florida, earn themselves another chance in Game 6, but Game 7 get blown out again in your own barn, and just outclassed in every way. So yeah, they pushed them to 7, but it didn't feel like 7 because of just how severely they got beat in that when it all mattered. And the pattern of them not showing up, and I would say it's not just Marner, but it's Austin, and Nylander didn't have a good series. Tavares didn't have a great series. Like, all the core guys, when it really matters, when it's a do or die game, their record was horrible. So I think that's where the frustration from the locals comes from, is just these repeated failures when they have a chance to close a team out. So I'm not opposed to shaking this up. I actually one of the many that kind of called for an earlier shakeup of the core 4, just because history has proven that it doesn't work. They need a new look. I think they need a bit of a refresh, and you just hope that maybe it's other guys feel a bit more empowered to step up in Marner's absence.
It's funny you talking about that, because I'm not trying to all bring it back to Marner, but you were kind of saying in that piece I referenced earlier that it was really Marner, just he was the next contract up. And so he was maybe the casualty of the organization, maybe making a change, going a different path, just because his term, if he had still had years on his deal, maybe it would have been one of the other core 4. I can't help but look at the parallels between the Stars and the Leafs, in the sense that two teams with very high-powered offensives, very good on the rush. But then when they've gotten into the playoffs, one of the things that they've fallen short on is being pushed around by teams that have beaten them ultimately because of physicality. Not necessarily toughness, although there's a degree to that, but just overall style of play. And, Luds and I have talked a lot about, with Sean and with Sam, who's not here today, about Craig Berube. And I'll leave Luds to ask him about specifically, but you get the sense that with both Berube and with Glenn Gulletson coming to Dallas, that there's this urgency of playing more of a playoff style and not just playing that sort of sexy Showtime hockey that you can win in the regular season with.
No, you're 100% right. And it was very noticeable. The Leafs style of play changed. Much more dump and chase. Craig Berube really stressed the forecheck. He really stressed parking someone in front to bang in rebounds or get tips. He loved the greasy goal. He would get so excited about a dirty goal that went off someone's hip. He wasn't there. He wasn't trying to see the Showtime type goals. He likes a 2-1 game. He loves a 3-2 game. And the Leafs, I believe, were in more 1-goal games through the regular season than any other team. And it kind of just changed their style of play. They used to be a little bit more run and gun. They used to get blown out sometimes, and they used to blow teams out sometimes. And that they found themselves in a lot more closer games to try and mimic playoff style hockey. Now that comes from Berube, but I also think it comes from Brad Treliving. The idea of the Leafs not being a soft team, I think, is kind of gone by the wayside since Treliving's come in. He's really rebuilt the defense. They block more shots. They throw more hits. They had, I think, over 10 different guys drop the gloves last year, which was really kind of foreign for Leafs fans, because it used to be they would have maybe 1 or 2 guys willing to do that. So the toughness is there. I think, that wasn't why they got beat out by Florida. I think Florida is just a better team and a deeper team. Like if the Leafs big guys like Matthews, Tavares, Marner, Nylander weren't scoring, they had no second wave. Whereas Florida, I think, has the best third line in hockey. And their fourth line was strong, and they could just they weren't so worried about matchups. Whereas the deeper you got into the Leafs bench, they'd get outmatched. And so all the pressure went on the guys making the most money. They couldn't carry the load, and they're on the outside. And there's no shame, in losing to the Panthers. They are a juggernaut, right? Like they are going for the Cap Bearers version of a dynasty. They should be right in the mix again. And the problem with the Leafs they're in the toughest division in hockey, in my opinion.
Boy, we can debate that in the other side of the break here.
The Central's pretty good. Central's pretty good.
Let's talk a lot more about that and everything else, Stars and Leafs, in just a moment here on DLLS.
Whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Brandon Bills has you covered with performance and style. Looking for some gear to make your brand stand apart from the crowd? Well, Brandon Bills has the best custom headwear around. Start your order, and their dedicated team will help you create the exact custom apparel you're looking for. They have a partnership with 40 colleges as a part of their campus collection, including TCU, Texas Tech, and Texas. So head over to brandonbills.com and use code BBDLLS for 15% off. I repeat, that's double B, D, double L, and then the S for 15% off.
That's perfect, Luds. Let's talk about Shady Rays. You know that moment when you realize you've left your favorite pair of sunglasses on the beach or on the roof of your car, a gas station 3 states away, not 3 miles. 3 miles you might turn around for. Or like I've done before, you had them in your pocket and you sit down and not realizing they're in the wrong spot and you hear a crunch. Well, we've all been there. So sometimes you don't wear your nice sunglasses, or you don't even buy them because you're worried about just destroying something and then you wasted a bunch of money and all that. Then I found Shady Rays and it changed the game because these sunglasses are made for real life, seriously good looking, polarized, durable, and not stupidly expensive. But the wild part is if you lose or break them, even on the first day you own them, Shady Rays will send you a brand new pair. No guilt trip, just replacements. So now you can actually, just like me, wear your sunglasses, whether it's on a hike or at a concert or on the boat, or just not be afraid to throw them in your pocket if you're going to go put on your shoes. Because guess what? Even if you break them, Shady Rays has your back. We've teamed up with Shady Rays to bring you an exclusive offer. Head to shadyrays.com. Use the code DLLS35 for 35% off polarized sunglasses. All right, we're going to bring Luke back in and toss it to Luds.
Well, Luca, just kind of starting where you finished off, as you're talking about the change there, the words that come to mind are, the culture, and to being able to be committed to winning in the playoffs. And you got to play. I'm a big believer. You got to play 82 games whether you're going to play in the playoffs instead of the light switch that you try to score goals and then all of a sudden you got to tweak it and going into the playoffs. And I look at whether it's Tree or, and again with Berube, I'm sure they're kind of players. But when you look at Nye, and Matthew Nye to me kind of falls in the middle of that kind of that identity. But Domi, Joshua, you mentioned. Joshua is what? They're 10, 11 years ago was a draft pick of them, and now they bring him back. Yeah. Nicholas Roy, right? Lawton. Like I look at some of these are blue-collar guys that are there to say, if you're going to beat us, you're going to pay the price to beat us. And that's the kind of identity I think that, because I said from the beginning, when Chief got that job, I said he's the perfect guy. He's the perfect guy to take those guys in. If they can't get molded to learning how to play the right way in the playoffs versus the regular season, well, then we got to start, making some changes. And it seems like that's where both from the management to the head coach are trying to do.
Yeah, and I think the fact that last year was just the first year under Berube, there was a bit of growing pains. I think there were some guys, like you mentioned, Matthew Nyes, and it's like that is the perfect coach for that player. He likes playing in straight lines. It worked perfectly. There were some guys, I think that it struggled a little bit with Berube's style. I'll give you a name, Morgan Riley. I think he liked Keefe's more possession type game a little bit more, and It took him a little while to find his footing under Berube. So the fact that this is the second year under him, I think is going to go a long way. One thing I would say is Craig Berube was really well respected by the players. He just walks into a room and there's a presence about him. He's firm, but he's kind. He's very likable. He's nice to chat with, but he's very clear and direct in his messaging. And he's kind of no nonsense. All his messaging is very simple and very consistent. And I think with Keefe, sometimes he would get caught up in what the opposition was doing and maybe try to tweak the Leafs game plan a little bit too much and maybe overthinking it a little bit. Whereas Berube is very much, we have a style we want to play. We want to play the same style, 82 games plus playoffs, and we want to dictate our brand of hockey. And I think the guys have bought into that messaging. So I wonder, a second year under him, are we going to see even more progression because there's going to be less of being, thrown by a new voice and a new system.
Luke, with the goal, Toronto, I'm always fascinated by it because obviously Joseph Woll has had some of those has had some of those moments, but then every time it seems he hits his highest moment, an injury seems to follow up. Anthony Stolarz obviously has really proved a lot of people that he was more than just a backup leaving Florida and then coming there. When it comes to just that tandem and where they're going, and it's just kind of a natural thing. It seems that someone always gets hurt at the worst time. What's kind of the path to finding the right stability in net there? And is it with the two guys, or is it there's the health concern where can both these guys stay healthy? Because it's an interesting tandem.
Yeah, and I think that question's just going to keep being raised. That was the question heading into last season too, because no one says that these guys can't stop the puck. It's more about health with both of them. And to be honest, the Leafs got a little lucky last year, and that they were, at least one of them was healthy all the time. So Stolarz, injured his knee in December. He had a minor procedure to clean it up. And during that time, Joseph Woll really took the reins and ran with it and owned the crease. And then there were times when Woll was getting overtaxed, and he played more. He had more starts last year than he had ever. And then Stolarz would pick up the slack. Stolarz heading into the playoffs really established himself as the guy. He carries himself with a bit more swagger. He's a little bit bigger. He has more experience than Woll. So it became clear that it was his net, but then, he gets concussed by accidentally on purpose by Sam Bennett, and Woll steps in and does an admirable job. And I think as long as one of them's able to stay healthy, it's a good tandem. There's only so many Connor Hellebucks and Bobrovskys and Vasilevskys out there. This is kind of the new NHL. You're not going to find 32 teams that have a clear number one. And for the price point, the fact they're both under contract at reasonable dollars, Stolarz can sign an extension. He's going into a contract year. So that's going to be a question mark this season. But as far as tandem goes, you can't get too much better in terms of they get along well, they push each other, and you're just crossing your fingers that at least one of them is healthy, because when they are, they do the job fine. And the Leafs are playing better defensively. They got a very mature D-core. They prioritize staying at home. If anything, their fault is not pushing the play enough. The Leafs ranked amongst the bottom of the league in terms of points by defensemen. So if anything, that's the area of concern, is are they generating offense from the back end? So they're protected well too. So I'm not, the goaltending is one of the least of my worries, I would say.
Luke, Sean just sent me a text. It literally was the next question I was going to ask. So we're on the same wavelength here, which is great. Why does it feel like the Maple Leafs and Nick Robertson, who's the younger brother of Dallas Stars winger Jason Robertson, have such a tricky relationship?
Yeah, it goes back since the very beginning. It's he's always struggled to earn the trust of the coaches, and it goes back to him not being healthy. him getting healthy scratched quite a bit. I think early in his career, he was seen very much as a one-trick pony. This guy's got an amazing shot. A lot of the Leafs will tell you that next to Austin Matthews, he probably has the most dangerous shot on the team, which is high praise. But there were questions about his size. There was a question about his defensive responsibility. If he's in his own end and the puck's coming around the wall, is he getting that puck out? Is he getting it to the hands of the centerman? Or is he fumbling with it and getting mowed down by a pinching D-man? Scared to use him on the PK. So it's like, if he can't, and there's no room for him on the top power play unit because of, the experienced, proven guys that they have up front. So it's like, where does he fit? They don't trust him enough to play him in the top six, but he's not built to be a fourth liner. So it's always been like a funny fit. Berube-like size, Trey Living-like size. So we've run into the situation where the last 2 summers there's been a minor standoff in terms of a contract, and both years he's only settled on 1-year deals, team friendly. You wonder with Marner's departure and some question marks like Michelli, Joshua, how are these guys going to fit? Who's going to put the puck in the net? There's opportunity there. He just has to go out and grab it and make it undeniable. But I think he's probably feeling a little bit sore because the last 2 playoffs, when it came time to Game 7, he was up in the press box. He wasn't trusted to play that game. So there's frustration on the player's part as well as management's part.
I got one left here, Owen.
Go for it, Luds.
Luke, I listen, when you were talking about Sam Bennett accidentally on purpose falling on top of the goaltender, I think the head coach behind the Toronto bench very secretly was going, I wish our guys would do that a couple different times too. You can't say that out loud there, but I'm thinking that's what he wants, right? Real short one for you. John Tavares, right? 1,184 games, 6 goals short of 500, 1,114 points. Is he a Hall of Famer?
Oh, short one. That's a tough one. I think he will be when it's all said and done. But you're right. The tough thing is the team's success. He's only seen round 2 twice in his career, and his Olympic gold came when he was injured, and he wasn't actually on the ice for it. But I'm going to say yes, just because I think we could see another 4 or 5 years out of this guy. The way he trains, I think the numbers are only going to go up. I think his style of game, because he plays below the dots, he's still going to put in 30 goals a year for a few more years, and the numbers will make it undeniable.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love the way the guy plays. I mean, even going through the process of being the captain of the Leafs and, handing that C over, and it looked like it did nothing but elevate him and said, I don't need to wear that letter. So ton of respect for JT.
One of the classiest guys in that room to deal with, hands down.
And that certainly doesn't hurt the Hall of Fame case in the committee of 14 that we never know who ballots are actually voted on. So that won't hurt because he will have won over some human stories on that front. Luke, to close it out, we like to ask all of our guests on the show just to make sure that this still is technically a Dallas Stars show, and we try to get the outside view of it. When you look across, when you look southwest from Toronto quite a bit, and when you look down at Dallas, what do you see and what do you make of the Dallas Stars for the upcoming season?
Well, I think they're still a great team. I was actually pretty surprised just how they went out against Edmonton. I thought they'd give the Oilers a bit of a tougher go. But yeah, no, I think they're still top 8, top 6 league-wide in terms of teams that should be considered cup favorites. I like their mix of youth and veterans. I'm really curious to see how much the coaching change is going to make a difference. It really seems like Pete DeBoer has a shelf life, and I had heard that the friction wasn't just Jake Ottinger, that there were some strong voices in the room that weren't quite on the same page as the head coach. So that excuse is gone. Like, new voice, Let's see it. And everyone has something to prove when a new coach comes in, right? Like you feel like you have to earn your ice time, and hopefully that's a positive effect.
Luke, it's been a pleasure. I'm sorry that our time is up already. You certainly didn't live up to Sean's definition of the circus because you're way too intelligent and even-keeled. But no, in all seriousness, really appreciate you coming on today. It's always fun. I love it when Toronto comes to town because there is a lot of energy in the morning skate, during the game, even the press box. So thank you so much. Hope we catch up with you soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
There he goes, Luke Fox, who is the senior writer in Toronto for Sportsnet. And in just a minute, we'll be saying hello to Dave McCarthy. But first, this from DLLS. And when I say this, it's actually me, because I took this one. We've been making Sam talk about this almost ad nauseum. The Cowboys event trip to Las Vegas. They're going on a road trip presented by True Fan Travel. And, of course, you can be a part of it. They are going to Allegiant Stadium. Sam's gotten better about saying the Raiders, which is what Chris Berman used to do on ESPN all the time on SportsCenter back in the day. November 15th through the 18th is the trip. The Monday Night Football game is Cowboys-Raiders in Las Vegas. They're staying at the luxurious Mandalay Bay Hotel, Casino, Resort, walking distance to the stadium and all the other easy access of the Strip. Your experience, we're talking about great accommodations, fan experiences. The itinerary includes a free day in Vegas. Boy, that would be dangerous to let Luds loose there. All-inclusive Dallas takeover tailgate, game day experience, and much, much more. So make sure that you, if you haven't already, sign up. Go to our website, alldlls.com, and be a diehard because you get a discount on events. Speaking of being a diehard and events, we told you this yesterday. We have a new event, and it's coming up on Monday, on August 25th, from 7 to 9 p.m. in our very studios. We're having the DLLS Mavericks diehard film session and Q&A in our studio. So Bobby Caralla and the DLS crew will be doing an interactive film session, plus answering questions, giving answers as much as they can, from 7 to 9 p.m. only for diehards. Food and drinks are also included. Additional proceeds will be donated to Big Brothers Big Sisters. So if you get in on this, you can get fed, refreshed, and hopefully get some great answers from Bobby and the gang. And if you'd like to be a part of it, sign up to be a diehard. Use that QR code, and then you can sign up to get that. Go to alldls.com to find that event. It is not an expensive ticket, but you have to be a diehard to attend. All right. Let us now bring on Dave. Dave McCarthy is the host, or a host, on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. He is also the Toronto correspondent for NHL.com. So he is fully immersed in everything Maple Leafs, and we bring him on now to talk just about that. Dave, I was asked yesterday if I had any fedoras to wear, and unfortunately my collection is lacking, but we are thrilled that you did, and Sean is prepared. And Luds is also prepared, and there's probably a hat over there that I can find. So welcome to the show, my good man.
Boys, you make me feel very... Look at this, out of nowhere here with the Stetson. I love it. You make me feel comfortable. It's great to be on here.
Got to fix it and make it straight. So aside from the hat brigade here, let's talk about the Leafs, because this is such an interesting organization. And, of course, there's always so much media scrutiny in Toronto. But this team has made the playoffs now. I believe it's 9 straight seasons. But they've only won 2 playoff series. So I know that there's a lot of disappointment from the fan base, the team, the organization, for having not met or exceeded expectations. But then I also noticed that prior to that, they hadn't made the playoffs. They made the playoffs once out of 11 seasons following the 04-05 lockout. So there was a huge drought of postseason action, and then this recent one. But I have to think that the fan base is dying for more than 1 or 2 appearances in the second round.
Well, that's just it. See, expectations have been raised in this city. The fact that they've made the playoffs every year since 2017, believe it or not, there are a lot of other teams around the league that would kill for that level of success. Buffalo comes to mind. Arizona/Utah comes to mind. The Ducks, Anaheim comes to mind. Chicago comes to mind, although they did win 3 Stanley Cups not all that long ago, so we'll take them off the list. But the point being is that it's hard to make the playoffs every year, as we here in Toronto learned, as you pointed out, from 2004 until 2017. And the only year they did make it was somewhat of a mirage. Fool's gold, I would say. It was 2013 in that lockout shortened season. And the Leafs that year had a bunch of guys that came up who had been playing in the AHL that might have been a step or two ahead of other teams. And if they had played 82 games, I wonder if they would have been able to hold on. So, and then that was the legendary. It was 4-1 against Boston in Game 7
yes.
in the third period, and then they caved right in. So it's been a long time since there's been tangible success in this city, but making the playoffs every year is not nothing. The question now is, how do they take the next step forward? Because without question, it has been underwhelming once they've got to the playoffs. And how it was underscored this year was that they looked like they had figured something out against Florida in the second round, up 2-0, up 2-0 and 3-1 in Game 3 before they fell apart. But then came home in a good position in Game 5, series tied at 2, and it was a no-show, like you've rarely seen on home ice. That was alarming. That was concerning. Then you go down to Florida, Game 6. Everyone kind of writes them off. Why would you have had much confidence in the team given how they played in Game 5 on home ice? And they played quite well. And they forced a Game 7, and then suddenly everybody comes back home thinking Game 7, okay, they got away with one. They're not going to duplicate as bad a performance in Game 7 as we saw in Game 5. And the Leafs essentially responded with, hold my beer. And somehow managed to be just as, if not worse. So that was disappointing. And now there's been change in the offseason, with Mitch Marner moving out the door, but it stands to reason you could not bring back the same core, nor did it seem like in this case, even if the Leafs wanted to bring Mitch Marner back, which they did, he had already made the decision clearly in his mind that he was not returning, which, so be it. Now there is change. I think the time for change was now. I think he'll still be a good team, and we'll see how they play moving forward with a team that will look different than it has since 2017.
Well, Dave, I'm glad you brought up Hold My Beer, because I just grabbed a Not Your Father's Root Beer, which I'm sure you know of.
Oh, yes. You don't have to convince me to have a pop or two. I'll be having one not long after we finish here.
So, Dave, everything that you talked about, and it takes me back to when our team here in Dallas, we needed to get past Detroit. And the owner, Tom Hicks, had called Bob Gainey up and asked him, what do we need to get past Detroit? And we had building blocks. You could see it every year. We were getting a little bit better. Ultimately, got a call, can we handle this certain guy? And the guy ultimately scored the goal. And I was like, yeah, we have no problem. We have a really good room. And then he ultimately scores the OT winner. So if they don't, how do you look at the loss to Florida? Because I think they would have been better going into that series, having games 5 and 7 on the road versus having to come back home and all that other kind of stuff. But can you look at this series and say this is a stepping stone to where you took the Stanley Cup champions? And even if they get past Florida, and say they lose the next round, I think it may be a different conversation, right? And even if you lost, but we're on our way. So by losing that round, do you feel that they've made progress, along with the general manager and head coach, making some structural changes as far as personnel?
Yeah, like I think honestly, Craig, that it would have been a different conversation if they had just been in games 5 and 7. If they'd just been in the game, the conversation would have been different. It's not about losing. You're going to lose a game 2-1 sometimes. Break, goes against you. Puck goes in off someone's shin pad and in overtime, and you lose. What are you going to do? You're in the game. There's nothing to hang your head. It would be disappointing. But it was the way that they lost that was the most concerning, because as you pointed out, it looked like they had started to make some progress and changing the way they play toward more of a Craig Berube type of style, a simple north-south, straight-ahead style where you're not beating yourself. But they resorted to those bad habits, and the worst thing was, and I never like to ask this question, but I can understand why fans would have the question occur to them. Were they even trying? Of course they were trying. But it looked like it looked at times like, are they even trying? That's how not in the games they were. But in saying all that, I do think they made progress with Craig Berube last year in changing the way they played. They won games in more of a sustainable fashion during the regular season. It wasn't always high wire, fire wagon, 6-5 type of hockey. There were a lot of games where my game piece was essentially done leading into the third period, and they just steered the game home. And I remember saying to some folks in the press box, like, man, we never had this level of comfort, feet up on the desk in the third period in years past. It was always down 4-2, go up 5-4, give up a goal, it's 5-5, winning over. Like, chaos. There was a lot less chaos to their game last year, which I think you need to have in order to have success in the playoffs. You just can't rely on heroics to win constantly. So I think they improved in that regard. Now the question will be, you lose Mitch Marner's production during the regular season. My contention is, to people say, oh, well, how are they going to replace it? They're going to make the playoffs again. I don't think that is of concern. And then once you get there, this will sound cold and callous, but there's not much to replace from that point on. It'll be about finding ways to not beat yourself, as I think they did in game 5 and 7.
Dave, just on that point too, and just to kind of connect all this, I look at this Leafs defense, and one of the things that Marner brought in the regular season, and obviously I think this part of his game was still there in the playoffs, even though it wasn't there in the final third, was he was really good at helping stretch in the zone, getting through the neutral zone and the transporting through neutral, right? And I look at this Leafs. No, you watched it closer than I did, so that's definitely fair. But
I pushed back against Florida. That's the thing. It was all they. I'll let you continue, but just very quick on that. Against Florida, it was all they could do to get the puck to their own blue line. Forget about getting it down the ice with structure and control. All they could do to get it to their own blue line, chip it out, and hope the hell they can get off the ice and get a change. They struggled with Mitch Marner to move the puck up the ice and stretch the play against Florida. And that goes back to the point that I was making. You got a team there that just caved you in, shift after shift after shift after shift. And the Leafs couldn't even think about getting into the offensive zone. It was all they could do to just get the puck out of their own end.
And so that kind of goes right into my point here, because we saw Chris Tanev in Dallas. And one of the things Chris Tanev brought in was the Stars had a lot of defensemen who, once they got the puck on their stick, they were good at getting it out. But it was the battle in front of the net, and it was getting that puck in the first place. The Leafs seem to have a bit of that opposite problem for me, is with this blue line, and you look at that group, is there enough there for the defense to be the transporters, to be able to get the offense going? Or with how that blue line plays when it comes to once they get the puck on their stick, not just the battling in front of them, bringing that kind of that Craig Berube attitude there when they don't have the puck.
Yeah, well, I think I like the blue line in a way that I haven't liked the blue line in Toronto in some time. I thought it was, quite honestly, a strength of the team. And I thought it was more on the forwards, their ability to get out of the zone, than it was with the D. And you're right, there does need to be some improvement. Part of what needs to happen is Morgan Riley needs to play better this year. He had a down year last year, but that'll happen at times. Not everyone's going to have their best year every year. Sometimes you're just not going to be at your best. And look, he had a lot going on in his life last year. He just had a baby. That can be a significant shock to somebody's system and an alteration in terms of their routine. And I'm not saying that's the reason alone, but I always like to stress that these guys are human beings and they've got lives going on outside of the ice. And sometimes stuff going on outside of the ice can impact how you play on the ice. If he can play better this year, that'll go a long way, because Morgan Riley at his best is still a quality transporter of the puck. Chris Tanev was excellent this year. Him and Jake McCabe were a pairing that Craig Berube could turn to time and again against other teams' top players. And by and large, there was nothing to worry about. I thought getting Brandon Carlo at the trade deadline really helped. And I think with a training camp and a little bit of experience last year, I do think that Morgan Riley and Brandon Carlo will be a really good pairing. And then on the back end, the back pairing, like Simon Benoit was really good as a number 5 defenseman. He did everything that you want him to do. He's big, he was physical, he was nasty, he killed penalties, and he was pretty reliable at even strength. He doesn't cost very much money. And Oliver Ekman-Larsson is a guy that has shown an ability to be able to play in a variety of different roles. He's got a nastiness to his game now that I don't remember when he broke into the league. I talked to Dave Tippett about him around, I guess it was early November last year, right as he was approaching his 1,000th game. Dave was the coach in Arizona when Oliver broke into the league. And I said, do you remember him being this like physical, this mean, this nasty? He's like, no, quite honestly, I don't, but he's an old grumpy man now, and that happens. And I thought that was pretty funny, but it just goes to show what Oliver is all about at this point in his career, which is doing what he needs to do to put his team in the best possible position to win. So he can play in that bottom pairing role. He can move up the lineup if need be. He can play a little bit on the power play if need be, which he did at times last year. And I think he can be a quality transporter of the puck. He was banged up in the playoffs last year, which did not help. So I look, quite honestly, boys, at the blue line as one of the strengths of this team. The area where I do have some concern is up front and where are the goals going to come from. Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Matt Nyes, not much of a concern there. John Tavares was really good last year. Does he drop off a little bit? Maybe. He's not making as much money this year, not nearly as much, so that won't be as much of a concern. If they can go out and add another forward better than John to put ahead of him on the depth chart, then I think they're really cooking with gas. And I think that'll be incumbent on Brad Treliving to make a move of that nature, because I don't think it's going to come before the season begins. But I think in season next year, there are going to be some teams that think they are good now that 20 games in will realize, like maybe Nashville last year, right? I don't know if we're as good as we thought we were. And then some guys will become available. And then that's when I think the Leafs have to go out and pounce to upgrade up front.
Ooh, I want to follow up on that with Dave, but we'll do it in just a moment after the ad break here on DLLS.
We always shout out our diehard, so Ardell's been blowing up the comments about how Dave cut me off, and I actually think it's great, because that means that we were having a great, thoughtful conversation, and I love being told I'm wrong or interjecting back and forth. That's great. So Ardell, shout out for that, and then let's talk about becoming a diehard. I believe next Tuesday is the 1-year anniversary of DLS. It's been a fun year. We've got a lot. That group's been pretty awesome. Of people have come in, and right now, you can become a diehard for $48 for the first year. You can sign up for a free newsletter. We've got some awesome merchandise there. When you sign up, you get a free shirt. A couple great options there. If they may or may not flash onto the screen, I don't know if that was in my show notes or not. And there we are. There's the Jake Ottinger shirt that we've got there. We got the Finnish Mafia shirt. And once again, I'm reading these as these pop up.
How about the Dallas collection, Sean?
Yes, the Dallas collection. I allegedly have one of those, but I don't know whether it's in transit somewhere or sitting on Ben's desk.
Which one did you pick?
I don't even remember. That shows how this works. I probably picked the Robin Ventura Nolan Ryan one. That's probably the one I picked.
I thought you picked the Dallas versus all y'all like Luds did.
I might have. That was the.
I don't remember now.
I also can say the word amalgamation, so I'm just going to say it so we can take a shot at saying here about the mascot.
Nobody's picking the dude up in the top right there with the sombrero on.
The old Big Tex?
Oh, whatever that is.
That would be the theme for today with the hats. So become a diehard. Great deals going on. Great content coming there. We've got you get access to those events we talked about earlier. If you want to learn about Mavs Film Room on Monday, that's going to be a great event. And so, yeah, become a diehard and check this link out right there. That disappeared as I went to point at it.
One last thing before we go back to Dave. We are inside 500 subscribers to 30,000 on our DLLS YouTube channel. So we would love to hit that big round number before we pass the 1-year anniversary of DLLS. Under 450, I think we were listening to the Mavs show an hour ago. They were talking about it closer to about 418 or so left and maybe even counting. So if you have not subscribed yet, hit the like button on the video, but also subscribe to DLLS. We would love to pass 30,000 and keep on growing. All right, let's bring back in our chapeaued friend because there are so many things to talk about, Dave, but you did there's a couple of details of this that I find fascinating with the Leafs because you mentioned, well, you're not concerned about where the goals are going to come from in the playoffs because Marner struggled at times, especially notably in the postseason. Boy, did he feast on things in the regular season. And as I'm looking through some of the players, I don't know if this depth chart that Puckpedia has is really accurate as far as line combinations, but I'm looking at 5 guys that I think fit in the Toronto Maple Leafs top 6, right? That would be Nyes, Matthews, Nylander, Tavares, Max Domi, and then who, right? I know Luds is high on McMahon and liked what he saw from the young player there. Well, I say young player is 29, but I also wonder if there's a spot, whether it is, we're talking about it with Luke in the last half of the show, whether it's Nick Robertson, he has the skill set. Matias Maccelli is an interesting one to me because 2 years ago, he was very impressive for the Arizona Coyotes, but he really struggled for Utah last year.
Yeah, he did. Well, look, let's be clear. It's not that I'm not concerned about where the goals are going to come from in the playoffs because there's not a lot to replace in terms of Mitch Marner's production at that point of the year. I am concerned. They're going to need to upgrade in that area because I do not think it is good enough. I think it's good enough to get into the regular season and get their feet under them and get rolling. But with the group that they have up front right now, I do not think that is anywhere near good enough to contend for a Stanley Cup. So, yes, they do need to upgrade. Look, I don't disagree with you. Matt Nyes, Austin Matthews, John Tavares, William Nylander. Those are your guys right now in the top 6. I look at significant opportunity on the left side with Tavares and Nylander, on the right side with Matthews and Nyes. I would expect Maccelli to get that chance with Matthews and Nyes at the beginning of the year because I look at him as a guy that is a bit of a poor man's Mitch Marner. He likes to carry the puck. He likes to distribute the puck. He's shifty. He's elusive, and he's a playmaker by nature. I've had some people suggest, well, why don't you try Nick Robertson on that line? And to them, I say, well, why the hell would you want to do that? You want Austin Matthews shooting the puck on that line. You don't want him deferring to Nick Robertson. And what Robertson's game is that he is an elite shooter. It's just that there's not much else there. So, and that's why he's been a bit of an enigma is that it's difficult, and I heard Luke talking about it as well at the end of his block. I totally agree with everything that he said. It's just really difficult to find a fit for Nick Robertson because that's all he does really well is shoot the puck. So you want someone on that line with Matthews and Nyes that can carry the puck, that can distribute the puck. That's not Nick Robertson. So I think Michelli will get that chance in the early going. If he falters, I could see Max Domi being elevated into that role. They had had success as a trio at the end of not this past season, the season prior when Mitch Marner missed a period of time with injury. They were quite good. I think there's opportunity on that left side with Tavares and Nylander for Nick Robertson. Because Tavares is a guy who his game is really well defined. He's really good in and around the net. He's not a guy that's going to carry the puck through the neutral zone. And he's not a guy that's really going to score from distance. Nylander's the transporter on that line, but he's a guy that can do everything well. He's a great playmaker. He can shoot. He can carry the puck. What you need is a guy on that line that can stretch the ice a little bit so that Tavares has a bit more room in and around the goal mouth area. You need a threat to shoot from a little further out, and Nick Robertson is that guy. The key is going to be, can Craig Berube rely on him to play up against other teams' better players, right? And if he can't trust him, that's where the problem comes into play. So if I'm Nick Robertson, I really try to refine my defensive game, my play when I don't have the puck, because just because you are something when you come into the league, he's still a young guy, does not mean you cannot improve. And that's incumbent on him if he wants to get where he thinks he can be. Craig, I agree. I thought Bobby McMahon, I was really high on Bobby McMahon. And then I wrote a big feature on the guy coming out of the Four Nations break. And then the guy never scored again. Like I thought it was like I thought I jinxed him. I put a hex on him or something. And it was really disappointing. He scored five games in a row. Part of it was when they rolled through Alberta, which is his home province. He had a bunch of family. It was a really nice story. And he's that type of guy that is a Craig Berube type player. He's a big guy, straight ahead. He's physical. He can skate. He could score. And then it just dried up. And I got to be honest, I was really disappointed in his play in the playoffs because I did think he was going to be a guy that would be a difference maker and could, sort of tip the scales in a series that often happens on that third line. That's where separation really seems to come into play, right? When your third line is better than the other team's third line, and didn't get that out of Bobby McMahon. And as you guys pointed out, he is not young. He's 29. He hasn't been in the league long, but he's not young. So we'll see what happens there. I thought there's something more there. I still think there might be, but he disappointed me in the playoffs.
Dave, as we asked Luke before, I like to ask every guest that comes on just what they think of Dallas. And so as someone who has who's part of your job with NHL Network Radio, you go through and you look at the league quite often. So I think you're pretty well versed to look at this. When you look at the Stars and you look at them in the league landscape, where do you see them now after some of the changes this summer and things that have gone down here?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I try to avoid the Leafs as often as possible on Sunday. Otherwise, I just get Muppets on Twitter being like, "Oh, he's a Leaf guy. That's all he talks about." So I try to keep the Leafs to a minimum on the show for just that reason. I love Dallas. I love everything about this team, and I have for a number of years. I think, to me, they have got to come into the season as a top contender for the Stanley Cup. I love the mix of this team. They've got young players that have stepped in and have made immediate impacts, like Wyatt Johnston, like Maverick Bourque, who's been really impressive. You look at Thomas Harley, who has come in and has really solidified a spot in the top four of that blue line, so much so that when Canada needed a guy at the Four Nations, he was the guy that got the call, and he played quite well. So they've got young guys that are making an immediate impact. They've got some of those younger veterans, not old guys, but not young guys either, like the Rupi Hintzes and the Jason Robertsons that are elite players. Going out and getting Mikko Rantanen was a stroke of genius by Jim Nill. He literally stole him from, not directly from, but he put him in a position to torment his former team time and again, including in the playoffs this year. So you talk about shifting the balance of power within the division. Colorado thinks they're getting Mikko Rantanen out of the division. Whoop, he winds right back up with maybe their chief rival. They're top. Like, honestly, I don't see too many holes in their forward group. Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin, some older guys, veteran guys that, as Craig, you were talking about earlier in the chat here, really important guys in the room to keep the room right. But they're also guys that are still contributing. Their D is sound, and their goaltending is really, really good in Jake Ottinger, although he wasn't at his best at the end of the Edmonton series. I still think he is an elite goaltender in this league. So I look at this Dallas team, like, I just don't see too many holes at this point, and I think it's got to be really encouraging if you're a Stars fan coming into the year to see what this team's going to be able to do, because I think they absolutely have a great chance to be a contender for the Cup, and don't think for a second that as the year goes on, Jim Nill won't try to continue to upgrade the group as well.
Well, Dave, great stuff. We're out of time. I'd love to ask you a ton more stuff, but first we do is raise a hat to you, sir. Appreciate you coming on today. And don't forget to check out Dave, not just covering the Leafs for NHL.com, but Sunday Brunch. Makes me hungry just thinking about it, on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. And not just because he's had me on as a guest a couple of times. It's great. So, Dave, thank you very much for your time today. We've really enjoyed it.
Boys, real fun. Thanks for having me on.
There he goes, Dave McCarthy from Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and NHL.com. Well, fellas, Luds, I feel like you're probably getting ready to get on a boat. Oh, yeah, Kim is too. So, bon voyage.
I'm the first mate. She's the captain.
Enjoy your trip today. And, Sean, we get to combine your two beats because we're going to talk about the Detroit Red Wings tomorrow, 1 o'clock Central Time. Ryan Hanna, host of the Winged Wheeled podcast, and then Max Boltman from the Red Wings beat of The Athletic will be on tomorrow. And Sean will be in his element because we can talk Red Wings and Stars, the two teams he covers most closely. So thank you, Sean. Thank you, Luds. Thank you to both Luke Fox and to Dave McCarthy. And a big howdy to Elijah, our producer. We'll see you tomorrow right here on DLLS.
We all silly like the mayor.